That's going to be it. So without further ado, Gafari, if you want to get started with your 30-minute presentation, is it useful to you at all if I sort of signal to you when you have 10 minutes left? Is that helpful? No, you got it? No problem. All right.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to appreciate all the members of the committee for coming here. So we've been on this for the past 3 months. Despite all your busy schedules, you still find time to read my thesis and give reports. Thank you so much for tolerating me. So all the professors and the faculties and invited guests present here today, my fellow students, please permit me to just stand on the already established protocol. My name is Gafari Lukumon, and today I will be presenting my PhD thesis on Myside bias and the spread of information within groups. So the work was supervised by Professor Brent Strickland and Professor McLean, so under joint degree supervision between the School of Collective Intelligence, UMCSP, and Institute Gineco Economist to Prayer. So because of the time, let me just start quickly. So in the first part of my talk, I'm going to give brief overviews on cognitive biases, then talk about my PhD themes as well as motivation. So I will talk about the main results, then conclude the talk. So no doubt, individual biases and motivation can have influence on the collective information flow. And by bias, I mean a distortion of fact due to an inclination towards or against something or someone. So, and these biases influence our perception in a way that it's even, one might not be aware about it. So, and bias can stem through various sources. For example, someone can just say, I hate this player. I don't know what the problem is. I just hate him. And some people might not want to see a particular person. Some people hate people based on their belief or their religion. So biases are inherent and natural. So it stems from personal experiences, societal influence, and religion belief. In fact, from the psychological perspective, everyone has one or more biases regardless of how objective they think they are. So I think I want to give an example to back this up. So which happened during a recent trip to Imlil, so which is near Marrakesh. So that day we were inside the bus, we just heard about an argument in the front row of the bus. And all those who participated in the argument, at the end of the argument, they were linked with one bias or the other. And what actually happened that day was that there was a guy who was drinking milk in the first row, and he just said, oh, this milk is sweeter than this one. So I think this is milk, the one on the right-hand side is the one which was manufactured in Morocco. And someone just said, oh, why will you say this milk is, sweeter than the other one? Then you are biased. So then he also replied that for saying that I'm biased, you are also biased. So this argument led us to, majority of us there were students from School of Collective Intelligence. So we have to, run a simple experiment without going to the lab, without designing the experiment on quadrics, so without collecting data on prolific or so. But what I want to bring out here is that at the end of the day, even after the experiment, then the guy who drank the milk said, no matter what you find out from this your experiment, I'm not going to believe. That is status quo bias. In fact, the guy who conducted the experiment, the experimenter, was trying to manipulate the expectation of the experiment. So I'm trying to say, in essence, that everyone is one way or the other, exhibits some certain biases. So, but the type of bias I'll be talking about, which is related to my project, is known as cognitive biases. So, which affect the cognitive processes such as perception, attention, memory. And there are 100 types of such bias which has been more than hundreds of them, which has already been discussed in the literature. So we have the confirmation bias, which is otherwise known as Myside bias, which is the tendency to seek out or interpret information in such a way that it aligns with one prior belief. You know, I said it's more or less the same thing as Myside bias, but Myside bias has an additional quality that, while confirmation bias confirms one existing belief, Myside bias discredits or disconfirms the opponent's prior belief. So we have the status quo bias. So when there is preference for the maintenance of one existing belief. So we have experimental bias, like one I stated the other time, groupthink, heading. So many of them. So gender bias, I saw Professor Siam discussing about gender bias the other time, many of them. So, but of all these biases I've mentioned, and the other one I couldn't mention, so the most powerful of them is cognitive bias. In fact, there are, a study from the literature that all other biases can boil down to confirmation bias. So I'm interested in this type of bias, confirmation bias, and the spread of information and its influence on the spread of information within group. So causes of these bias have been studied in different domains, in sports, in organization, in medicine. So taking the perspective that the dynamics determining information flow within social group emerges from the collaboration of many individuals. So then we can say that the intervention to improve the quality and quantity of such information can also occur at individual as well as the group level. So in essence, holistically, I'm interested in looking at how individual actions and decisions affect the overall spread of information within group. And the objective is to find way to improve the spread of good information, that is accurate information, and reduce the spread of bad information. And the project is structured into 4 axes. In the 4 axes, we look at the perception of loyalty and biases in organization. So second axis look at the attitudes of people towards the first fact-checking group. In the third axis, we look at the cost and benefits of Myside bias in scientific community. And the fourth axis is about crowd-based idea filtering. So for the first axis, remember I said we are looking at perception of loyalty and influence on the spread of information. So this project is in collaboration with Professor Brett Strickland and Professor Cosimano from Yale School of Management. So, and it might be interested to know that we are currently prepared to submit this work on psychological science, and we've submitted the abstract last year to SJDM. It was accepted. So what actually motivated this project is that we know that any organization, society, so they make decisions based on the shared belief, and depending on the accuracy of the belief, whether it is good or bad, then they made their own decision. And depending on either good or bad, they can make decision that is good for them, not only for the group or the individual. And there are a lot of factors that can be used to improve accuracy. So we have open communication, group diversity. So, and making decisions based on evidence-based decision. So of all these factors I've mentioned, the desirable goal is the accuracy. So this is not true for the case of belief formation alone. It is also true in the specific case of forecasting. In essence, when you make an accurate forecast about your business or organization, then you can make informed choices. But unfortunately, some of the type of cognitive biases I mentioned the other time can intervene the inaccuracy. So, for example, in a study, it was found that people feel pressure to agree with their peers and opinions while neglecting sharing opposing views. So one other type of cognitive bias is over-optimism. So it can also lead to inaccuracy, which is having an overconfidence that negative thing is not going to happen. And if a manager or a director of an organization has this type of cognitive bias, they can incur some losses. So most people like optimists and prescribe optimism. People prescribe optimism, and conversely, it means, they punish pessimism. So to let you understand this better, suppose you are the one presenting your PhD thesis today, and prior to your defense, you now ask your best friend, okay, Abdullah, what do you think will be the outcome of my defense today? And Abdullahi said, yes, you see, Gafari, I'm sorry, but I don't think you are going to pass the defense. You know, you won't, even though you are a best friend, or even though you might be saying something, I mean, giving you an accurate information, you might have some level of distrust or, I mean, thinking your friend is not disloyal. So our claim is that people may face pressure to form an optimistic belief about their organization for fearing of being disloyal or fear of being fired. So before the current investigation, it was not clear how about people think about the prediction of others. In some case, people think someone who is pessimistic, like Abdullah mentioned, probably is trying to get, oh, if I tell Gafari that hey, what I'm saying, I mean, it's not green light, probably is going to prepare. So maybe a pessimist and somebody protecting the group from making bad decisions. And in fact, in a study by Teddy, I mean, optimists are more motivated toward the group's goal. So it means if we combine this together, we can say loyal members as those who either conform or reason carefully for the group. So we want to adjudicate this between these possibility in our study. And what we are trying to ask from the study is probably, like I've said, whether people will be perceived as disloyal for prediction and claims that go against their organization interest. And if this is the case, what is the possible consequences for such attribution? And what are the inferences people made before they do that? And to attempt this, we use an experimental Fig-Night approach across 7 pre-registered studies. We recruited participants from Prolific. So although from experiment 6 and 7, they were American participants. So because we use them to replicate, all of the remaining participants recruited from the UK. And we asked them to read a passage about the character John making prediction. In one case, John is making prediction in support of his organization. And in another case, he's making prediction against his organization. And after that, we ask questions about John's loyalty. So it's a between participant design. Thank you, Professor Charlene, for calling my attention that it is good to use a classical language when talking about design like this. So in some case, we have 2x2 design. I'm going to explain further. So we replicated this design across the 3 contexts in sports, political organization, as well as company scenario. And for the sport case, this is the stimuli we gave to our participants about John. So I let you read. So John is a fan of Manchester United Football Club, and is at the Manchester United Football meeting with other fans of the club. And a match is coming against Liverpool in few hours, and the player have been preparing ahead of the clash to ensure they win the contest. So, and everyone in the group were asked to predict what will be the outcome of the match. Majority of the people predict a victory for Manchester United. Oh, we are going to win. So when it's now come to the turn of John, in one condition, that is the optimistic condition, he says, oh yes, we are going to win the game. It will be in our favor. In another condition, which is the pessimistic condition, John says, they are going to beat us. So this is the case for the organization context as well. So we define John as someone, who is an employee in this company, which is based in the UK. And they are all at the meeting organized by the CEO. So, and the company aim to increase their sales with the new cell phone model. So they've invested a lot of money in that. Again, majority of the group predict that the model is going to be a success. During the turn of John to predict, in one condition, that is the optimistic condition, he predicts that the model is going to be a success. So in another condition, he predicts that they are going to fail. So in the third context, that is the Conservative Party, John is seen, as an intern of the Conservative Party, a major political party in the United Kingdom. Also, they are also in the meeting with the other interns, and everyone is asked to predict what will be the outcome of the policy they are preparing. Will he assist the political party to win the election or not? Again, majority of the interns predicted a win for the party. So in one condition, John predicts a win, and in another condition, he predicted a loss. I don't know if you get the idea now. So we measure loyalty by asking the following dependent variable questions, dependent variables. One, we ask whether John is loyal or not. Then we ask whether John is an ardent supporter or just a fair weather supporter who can just leave the team, the organization, and the party when things become difficult. Also, we measure the perceived loyalty by taking the average of the two dependent variables. So also, we try to manipulate John's beliefs. So when his prediction goes against the organization and when the prediction is in support. In the subsequent study, like from experiment 3 and above, we also manipulated his disagreement or agreement with the group. Okay, now because of the time, for the first experiment, we ran the study, and as you can see from in my y-axis is the loyalty score, and in the x-axis we have the prediction. The green bars are those who saw the average, score of those who saw John predicting in support of the organization. The red bars are those who saw him predicting against when John is being pessimistic. So as you can see, we found that observer John, pessimistic John, less loyal. And we found this effect across all the organization contexts, for organization, for party, as well as the sport. So, when we finish, the first experiment, we were curious, probably because the participants are not aware where John is forming his belief. And what we are trying to do in experiment 2 is to check the role of perceived accuracy. What we did was that, we now added a paragraph, so in the stimuli, so whereby, we talk about, we said before the meeting, then the CEO of the company introduced what we call prediction markets. And, we know the meaning of prediction market. Numerous scientific studies have shown that prediction markets are a reliable indicator of the likelihood of the event. And immediately after the CEO talked about the prediction market, then he made mention of the result from the prediction market. In one case, the prediction market predicted a success for the organization. In another case, it predicted a failure. And in all the 2 cases, John follows the prediction market, and the prediction of the organization remain constant. They are optimistic about the group. And what we also found, we replicated our effect. But something really interesting happened in this experiment too. We added a kind of stimulus check in our design. So whereby we ask people out of, based on what they've read, do they think John is likely to be correct? So or the majority or both of them. And when we try to calculate the likelihood of correct prediction, we found out that 56%, majority of them said John is likely going to be correct. And we now, made a kind of restricted analysis on the subset of participants who said John is likely going to be correct. And as you can see, we replicated the same loyalty effect. You said John is likely going to be correct, and you still say he's loyal. So that is Myside bias. So despite believing John is likely to be correct, they still consider him as disloyal. So, but for experiment 3, it's also not clear. We don't know whether pessimism is the one driving the effect, or whether because John is in disagreement with the group. So then we now ran a kind of 2x2 design. So whereby we manipulate John's belief. So when he's being optimistic and pessimistic about his prediction is being pessimistic or optimistic, then as well as the agreement, whether he agrees or disagrees with the group. We found, irrespective of his agreement, whether he agrees with the group or whether he disagrees with the group, then we found the same loyalty effect. They observed that the pessimistic John is less loyal. So in fact, this loyalty effect persisted even when the target aligns with the pessimistic majority. That is when John goes with the majority. Now we know that we found the loyalty effect. We want to check what will be the possible consequences of having that kind of perception on people. And in experiment 4, we ran the study, experiment 3, using the design in experiment 3. We replicated the design. And immediately in like a 3rd page of the experiment, I think Professor Rebecca made mention of, having a kind of filler activity. So we actually bring this question at the third page of the experiment. So we just ask the participant to imagine whether they are John's supervisor in the company, and how will John's reaction in the meeting affect the likelihood of them giving him a promotion, whether they are going to invite him to a social event, whether they are going to increase the size of his NDA bonus. And, we found that people being more likely to promote, give bonus, and invite to non-social function optimistic John than pessimistic John. So we found this effect even when the John aligns with the pessimistic majority. So in experiment 5, we want to see why people infer disloyalty from pessimistic forecast. And our prediction there is that pessimistic John is someone who does not care about the company, is not motivated to see the organization to make success. So, and we try to measure these dependent variables. So we measure the perceived motivation. So by asking whether John, will be at the risk of losing motivation to see their plan work through. So whether he will put as much effort as his colleagues. So we measure the passive serviceness, passive care. So for the passive serviceness, we ask whether John's prediction about the fund or about the match is driven by his desire for personal gain or advancement. And for passive care, we ask whether John care or cares or does not care about the product is successful or not. And we found that. So we found that the observer judged pessimistic John as not being care, as not being motivated. But something looked weird in our results. As you can see for the passive serviceness, so we found out that our participant, they saw optimistic John as someone who is trying to be a self-serving person. So for example, his prediction is based on his interest. It is weird because, they said optimistic John is loyal, and they saw that he's trying to predict based on his interest. Then you can see there is a kind of a Myside bias there as well. So because of the time, we replicated our results with people that has organization interest, that is MBA student of Yale School of Management. And we replicated all the results, the loyalty effect, the consequences, so the potential inference. So in the last experiment, we replicated it also with American participants. In fact, we checked the situation whereby the majority is uncertain as well. And of course, we replicated all the effect, the loyalty effect, so the consequences. So because of the time, I need to skip this. So the consequences as well as the inference. So what are the lessons learned? We found out that individuals with pessimistic view are perceived as less loyal. And we found out that what is actually causing, the loyalty effect is pessimism, not the disagreement. Also, we found people are still perceived as less loyal, even when they know they are correct. So we also find people likely to promote, invite optimistic member than the pessimistic group member. So, and when a member is pessimistic, people think it's less motivated to bring about good outcomes. And lastly, people think that optimistic member is making self-serving prediction about, but also that it is loyal. So, which is very surprising. I don't know if I should just go and take question at the end of all. Okay, so in ASIS 2, so this ASIS in collaboration with Brett Strickland and Professor Nick Bird of Stephen Institute of Technology. So it's on individual preferences and motivation for choosing fact checkers. So no doubt we know people rely on information. About 12 o'clock today, Professor Strickland asked me, Gafari, so where is the defense room? I tried to show him. If I did mean I show him wrong information, he will have arrived there lately. So there are sources where we can obtain information. We have traditional sources, which is face-to-face interaction like one I had with him. So television, newspaper, and on social media. But there used to be a dilemma. I was reading the news one day. If you check this one, this is the chief of staff to the president of Nigeria. The news said, okay, this guy gets 10 billion naira to renovate his office. And waking in the morning again, I saw another contrary news that no, I live in my house. So no budget for renovating my residence. So you can see that one of them is actually misleading. So I mean, by fake news, I mean the misleading information presented as accurate. So in a sense, without proper fact checking, one can confuse and consume this misleading information. So fact checking can be referred as verifying the accuracy and reliability of information. So, but unfortunately, partisanship has influence of fact checking. If you know about, I mean, a political atmosphere in America, you will see that when we talk of CNN, so I mean, all news that are leaning to Democrats, you are going to find it there. But false news are more leaning to Republicans. So, in essence, partisanship has influence on fact checking. But people are more likely to trust the fact checking sources. Sorry. Yeah. When you shared. Not this. Sorry, can you see my screen now, by the way? That is strange. Yeah. I'm sorry. Oh. Yeah, it's working now. Yeah, but I'm sorry. Just let me share it this way. Okay, cool. Let me try and use this. Oh. Okay. Okay, wait first. Okay, it's working now. Yeah, I'm sorry about the. Also, people are more likely to trust fact-checking sources if they believe the source to be credible, according to the study from Pennycook. So we also know that, the other time I made mention some factors that can increase accuracy. So when there is collaboration among diverse group, so we can also increase the accuracy. So then we are trying to ask whether we can increase trust in good information and decrease trust in misinformation through adversarial collaboration among fact checker. By adversarial collaboration, I mean a diverse group of fact checker coming together to deliberate to fact check news item. And we actually answered this question using experimental approach as well across 2 registered studies. We recruited participants also on Prolific, and we asked them to read 16 headlines. So 8 of them is left-leaning and 8 is right-leaning. Half of the headlines are true and half of them are false. So each on controversial issue in the UK, gun control, abortion, immigration, and all of that. So this is the example, it is typical of what we can see in the social media. And we try to measure the trustworthiness. For example, to what extent do people believe the consensus conclusion of the fact-checking group? We measure the decision to publish. So whether they are going to agree to publish the news item if they are the editor of the newspaper. Then we took, a composite measure of both of the DV by averaging them together. We as well check for the preference. So which of the fact-checking group would they prefer to fact-check their news content, assuming government is trying to organize such organization, and their motivation for their preference. So because of the time, we manipulated the fact-checking group. So we have the homogeneous left, homogeneous right, and heterogeneous. By heterogeneous, we asked them, we told them that the heterogeneous committee, so comprising of those who voted for Joe Biden and those who voted for Donald Trump in the last election, they've come together. So after a vote with clear majority that a particular news item is true, and the news is, is true by nature. In some condition, we have it. When the news is false, we put false there. And we ask this question: to what extent would they believe the consensus conclusion, and whether they are going to publish the news item? So for the homogeneous left, so it comprises of fact checker completely from those who voted for Joe Biden in the last election, and also for homogeneous right, those who voted for Donald Trump. So, and we asked, like, for example, from all the three options, which of the category would they prefer to fact check their news item online? And for the preference, we found out that a strong preference for ideological diverse fact-checking groups. So people from Democrats and Republicans, they prefer, the heterogeneous, the diverse group to fact-check their news content. In fact, about 3 times higher compared to homogeneous left, and about 6 times higher compared to homogeneous right group. So when we asked for the motivation for selecting such, for preferring such composition, and these are some of the response our participants gave. Some of them, oh, as sad as it sounds, I don't feel confident trusting any of the Trump voters for both accuracy, for trust and accuracy. One of them says, okay, now I'm going to prefer 50-50 committee to ensure validity and make sure biases aren't getting in the way. So, but for the believability, so I think this is interesting to see. Our participants, the Republican and Democrats alike, they believe heterogeneous fact-checking group as much as their own, but they express interest in the out group. So if you see for the Democrats, you see we couldn't find, a significant difference between the trust in the heterogeneous and their own group, but there was a difference between that of the out group. The same with the Republican. So that, which is also, evidence of Myside bias. So we also checked for trustworthiness. We found the same effect. So also for decision to publish, we couldn't find that. And I think an explanation I can give that is that even as an editor of an organization, if you believe in something and you trust it, if your organization does not permit it, it might be difficult for you to, publish it. So the conclusion for that is we found stronger preference for ideological diverse group. And we, as you can see, left-leaning individuals show stronger inclination towards the in-group. And both Democrats and Republicans believe and trusted a heterogeneous group of fact-checkers as much as their own, but trusted the out-group less. So this indicated significance of diverse perspective and a balanced representation of political view. So because of the time, let me quickly rush to the ASIS 3. So it's also in collaboration with Professor Strickland and Professor Chemla from Institut Génico and École Normale Supérieure. So we are trying to look at, when people talk of bias, people used to talk about the negative aspects of bias. So, but at times, bias can have, a positive, benefit. So we try to, using agent-based approach, we try to simulate the influence of Myside bias in scientific environment. And, we actually got the motivation from, over the year, there used to be a replication crisis. In fact, about 30 to 40% of studies published in psychology are not replicable. Such failures undermine the credibility of theories building on them. So, and this is because of the biases in sciences. It is present when an experimenter is presenting. So there is bias known as experimental bias. We have reviewer bias when they are reviewing. And when the result of the publication is out and people form belief from there, there is also reader bias. So we notice that extensive literature suggests that these layers, experimenting, reviewing, as well as updating, they are prominent for Myside bias in real world, both scientific and among non-scientists alike. So like I've said, we now use agent-based modeling to measure the impact of Myside bias on the accuracy and speed of decision. And this is the simulation of a few because of the time. So we simulate population consisting of biased and unbiased scientific agents. So, and they conduct multiple experiments and update their beliefs based on the result. So biased update is the one that deviates from the Bayesian update. So in fact, we measured bias by estimation of prior. That is, if an agent is biased towards a particular hypothesis, they may overestimate the prior probability. And because of the time, we measured, we tried to incorporate 2 parameters. So the bias level, so which ranges from 0 to 3.4, as well as the precision, which is the reliability of the experiment, and the likelihood that the experiment has a correct outcome. And using both bias and precision level, we computed two metrics. Number one, the accuracy, that is the average number of correct decision over the simulation. So then we also measure the speed of accuracy, which is the evidence level. So to quickly rush to the results, we found that if a scientist is biased, the less accurate that scientist. That is not surprising, because I said the other time that if a decision is not accurate, if a decision is biased, then they are going to have less accurate decision. So, but more surprising is that we found out that the more biased the scientists, the less time to reach conclusion. This has a positive benefit, for example, in a resource-constrained environment. What I mean by that is the resource-constrained environment here is time. So, for example, now, let's assume someone is in the building and there is a fire outbreak. It is better for that person to consider, an option that is in line with his belief than waiting for order. So that is has an advantage when there is a resource constrained environment. So to quickly round it up, ASIS 4, which is in collaboration with Professor McLean, we actually published this in Decision. So we look at the type of information people are best at spotting. Professor Klein and one of his collaborators, okay. So in 2015, they published an article on idea filtering with bag of lemon. An idea behind the bag of lemon is that, when we have an open innovation, probably an organization is having challenges, you can ask crowd to give you an idea, which is similar to what Fission 2030 UMCSP is doing. But at the end of the day, even if you collect an idea from UMCSP community alone, you are going to have, chunk of ideas. Then you still have problem to select the best out of them. So, but what Professor Klein and his colleague did was that, they introduced a bag of lemon, which is better at spotting bad ideas than recognizing the good one. Give people the budget of lemon and they ask them to distribute into ideas they think are worse. And they found out that this bag of lemon is better and is accurate and faster than some other crowd-based filters like bag of star. So which is when you give people budget of star and you ask them to distribute into excellent ideas, not the worst idea. Then we have the conventional Likert scale. So, and in the paper, they have an hypothesis, and their prediction is that bag of lemon, the explanation is that bag of lemon is better at spotting bad ideas than recognizing the news one. So building on the theory of negativity bias, we state that our emotional responses are biased to correcting mistake rather than recognizing what went well. So we try to test this hypothesis, varying the number of tokens. So, for example, now in their study, they use I forgot, maybe 2 studies, but we vary our own. So we use varying numbers of tokens. So we recruited participants also on Prolific. We have 8 proposal design. We asked our expert to select the, okay, sir. So we have our expert to select 3 out of them using the Delphi approach. And it's we use bag of lemon. We have bag of lemon in a situation whereby we give people the budget of lemon and we ask them to distribute them. We have bag of stars where they like it. When we design the website, so for the bag of lemon interface, so we have a situation whereby a lab manager wants proposals that will substantially improve productivity in the lab. So, and it's considering a proposal that is cheap and fast to implement. And out of the 8 ideas, for those in a bag of lemon, 2 conditions, that is those who we gave 2 budget of token, we asked them to select the worst out of them. So for the bag of star, interface, we ask people to select the 2 best proposal. And of course, for the Likert case, we just ask them to rate. So we ask them to rate. And because of the time, we replicated the effect. So we found out that bag of lemon is also great in terms of accuracy and speed. And aside that, we got something surprisingly from that is for somebody who is considering idea filtering engagement. So if they want to select the winners, then the number of tokens they should give must matches the number of the winners. So that's the effect of the token budget size. I can see Professor Mascarians raising his hand and signaling that the time is over. So in conclusion, we found out that the diversity of opinion in the group increases the accuracy of forecasting and aggregate judgment. So, and this is the consequence of Scott-Page theorem. That is, when the diversity is large, the error of the crowd is small. Also, we found the impact of Myside bias on decision making. It can lead to bias reasoning due to the fear of being considered disloyal, affecting the accuracy of the prediction. And we have to be aware of Myside bias in our community, so in order to promote open-mindedness in group decision. And you can see that Myside bias also has consequences for group dynamics. In essence, groups may exclude diverse perspective, overlooking the critical views as well. And like I've said, apart from the negative aspect of confirmation bias, it also has its positive side. So it can be useful to speed up decision making in time critical situation. But there is risk to Myside bias. In any case, I think Professor Littman was asking about that okay, now when what are we going to do in the case of accuracy? So of course, in scientific community, what is good for science is, an evidence base that is free of bias. But for example, in some other organizations, so whereby there is a time constraint, like the example I gave the other time, so then it might be great to consider it there. So then swift decision making should include mechanisms to accurately filter out ineffective or incorrect ideas. And so what are the recommendations for mitigating Myside bias? So implement robust peer review processes and ensure transparency in methodology and data analysis. Cultivate an inclusive and diverse scientific community to foster more objective and reliable. So use a kind of blind process when you are recruiting, and also we can have like a kind of anonymous survey. So whereby you ask people, when they know that they won't know the author of a post, then they can be free to express their opinion. Overall, my project deepens understanding of Myside bias and highlights its implication for information dissemination. So sciences does not always go the way we want it. During my PhD, I abandoned some projects. So I carry a lot of pilot that did not work out eventually. One of them is the one with Professor Winters. So likewise, the one with Melusine. So then what next now? I'm happy to inform you that I have postdoctoral opportunity waiting for me. And during that, I'm going to make sure I publish some of my research, the one we've not published yet, and also try to replicate some of the findings with African participants. So I would like to appreciate my supervisor, Brett Strickland, and Professor McLean from believing in me, as well as my collaborator, Professor Nick Baird, Professor Corey Kusimano, Professor Emmanuel Chemla, and our powerful scientific director and executive director for the IEP, Professor Kahao Madagin, and Professor Les Paulson. So Professor James, Professor Emile, and Professor Hugo Messier, as well as our committee, thank you very much for reading my thesis despite your busy schedule. Professor Salvador, Professor Charlene, Professor Rebecca, of course, Professor Dekbo, and Professor Siam Lekchiri. So I would also like to appreciate my colleagues and some of my senior colleagues like Antoine, Mary, Maria Bracken, my colleagues. Melusine is, of course, also presenting his PhD today. Hugo Trad, Sasha Hatse, Dawe, Hualinzio, and Professor Fatima, our scientific director, my friend Yaya, and Professor Segofia. I appreciate Momo. Thank you very much. Hannah, Professor Sana Lalali, my friend Musin, and Hamza. So all the staff, member of staff, in the School of Collective Intelligence and Institute Geneco. So my friends, my parents, my wife, and of course my kids. So my sibling, thank you very much. But before I hand the talk, let me ask the whole room, do you think we are biased? So you might now talk me too. So thank you so much for the presentation.
All right. Thank you so much, Gafari, for that tour de force. Let's get right to it with hopefully a very spirited discussion. We'll start with comments and questions by Rebecca Littman. I'm going to ask everybody that we stick to 15 minutes total, including answers from Gafari. So I will ask that committee members limit their remarks to about 10 minutes, so we can leave 5 minutes for Gafari to respond. Rebecca, please take it away.
Great. Thank you so much. I just want to start by saying that this is an incredibly impressive body of work for a PhD. Just the amount of studies and different theoretical ideas and the execution of that. It's really impressive to be able to pull all of that off in the time of a PhD, and then to put it all together like this. So I want to start by congratulating you for doing that, both in the thesis and also for figuring out a way to present all of this in 30 minutes, which is also a big challenge. So I'm gonna focus on some questions and comments that I had while reading the various chapters. No surprises; these are all things I put in the thesis report. And so these were just, I think overall the work is really fantastic. So these are just some questions that I had while reading the studies, and a lot of them have to do with kind of how we think about taking some of these ideas from the lab, how they might translate if we're thinking about the phenomenon in our everyday lives. So starting with chapter 2, one of the things that struck me was it was really interesting to see that you looked at these downstream consequences of expressing pessimism or optimism. But one of the questions that I had is that in the way that you asked about that, it was very directly and explicitly, the downstream consequences were directly and explicitly tied to John's statement of pessimism or optimism. So the questions were asked, how would John's pessimistic or optimistic statement affect these outcomes? So the one thing I was wondering is, I think oftentimes when we think about someone making this statement, we're not going to be making decisions right in the moment tied to these statements, tied to an explicit pessimistic or optimistic statement. We're going to maybe see someone make a statement like this. It's going to maybe change our impression of that person, how they relate to the organization. And then maybe a day later or a week later or a month later, we're going to be making decisions about our interactions with them at the organization in different ways. And so I'm curious to hear your thoughts on whether you think that you would see these same downstream consequences when there's a little bit more distance between the initial expression of optimism or pessimism and different kinds of interactions and decisions that you might make about John in these different settings. Another question that I had on chapter 2 is, I really liked that you looked at these different inferences, attributions that you might make about John, but I think it wasn't totally clear to me why you chose those inferences and what the hypotheses would be, so what we might expect about them. And it's tough to do that in a paper with 6 studies. There's only so much room theoretically to build out all of these different predictions. But that was something, and I know you wrote it up for psych science too, which has limited word count, makes it even more challenging. But I was curious to hear a little bit more about why you chose those inferences, and what kind of predictions you might have had in advance, especially given the somewhat surprising and I think really interesting finding about seeing the optimistic John as both more loyal but also more self-serving. And then the last question I had for you on study 2 is, and I think, I mean, these results seem really robust, and I think that this is a really important finding. And I was wondering, what does this mean for all of us if we're in an organization and we actually do have a pessimistic view? Is there any way to mitigate that or counter that by, is it enough to say, I really love this organization, I really believe in what we're doing, but this time I don't think we're going to win? Does that help? Or is just the idea that you're saying something pessimistic, even if you try and couch it and express your loyalty in other ways, is that just, do you think that that's always strong enough to make you seem like you're less loyal to the organization? Should I stop there for these questions or keep going with the other studies?
Okay, yeah, no problem, Prof. Let me start from your last question. So you asked, probably what are the ways to mitigate this pessimistic effect? So in one of the pilots we ran on, I think, experiment 5B, so we tried to, have a kind of framing study. So I don't know if I have the results very close to me, but what we, in that study, we would have another condition. So whereby we call it explanation condition. And before John makes the prediction, he says, so I'm sorry, I have to say this. It's not that I hate, the organization, but I'm making my prediction based on this and this. And, we found out that at the end of the day, so there was no difference between optimistic John and in that same condition when he gave explanation. I don't know if that is what you are saying. So for the case of the potential inferences, we measured 3 things. We measured potential care, passive care, so passive motivation, as well as passive serviceness. The prediction there is that, what we are actually interested is what people infer before they make, before they ascribe loyalty or disloyalty to someone. And, our prediction is that for someone like pessimistic John, people will say he's not care about the organization or is not being motivated to see, good results. Let me quickly show that. And, we found out that for pessimistic John, so people, infer that he's not being care about the organization and is not motivated to see good things happen. But something strike happen like the one you suggested that for the optimistic John, our participant sees him as self-serving. And I think an explanation I can give to that is also Myside bias we've been talking about. Because you believe someone is loyal, and at the end of the day, you said this, you saw him as making, self-serving prediction, and you also say he's loyal. So I don't know. I think it is Myside bias. So for the first question on downstream consequences, so you ask, okay, I'm sorry. I want to, okay, yeah, this is for the inferences. So you asked about adding a kind of filler activities in such a way that we don't mention, John behavior directly. Well, Prof, I agree with you, but thanks for your comment, Prof. So, but in some other cases, if you check the experiment very well, we didn't measure only downstream consequences there. In fact, we replicated all the loyalty effects. The 2D fees come. Then immediately after that, we brought the downstream consequences. I think it's, I might be wrong, but I think it leaves a kind of a small space whereby the participants have participated in other activities. Then at the same time, we just mentioned what will be the John's, based on John's behavior in the meeting, not directly mentioning whether he's being optimistic or pessimistic. I don't know if that answers your question. So in essence, it's somewhat indirect to the best of my knowledge, Prof. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a little, you're right, it's a little less direct than I was kind of describing it, but I think my it might be something like in a
Okay.
paper to just mention in the
Okay.
discussion. It still links it with his behavior in that meeting. And I think a lot of times when we're making decisions, I mean, maybe a, hey, do you want to hang out with me tonight, might be more linked to something you saw that day. But if we're thinking about things like promotion, you're probably not thinking about one specific meeting. You're doing a more global evaluation of the person. And it does seem plausible that if someone makes a statement like this even once or maybe multiple times, it affects your global evaluation of them, and you might still see these downstream consequences. But I think oftentimes we're not necessarily just thinking about one interaction for some of these types of consequences. So it might just be something to mention in a discussion. But thank you. I think that those were really great answers. How much time do I have left? I think I'm almost done here. Let's see. Sorry, I didn't glance at the clock when I started.
What? Sorry. Okay.
I have
Yeah.
another question if I have time, but I don't want to go over my time limit.
You okay? You have another question?
Yeah, I'll do one more question for you, and then I'll pass it along.
Yeah, that is completely fine, Prof. Yeah, go ahead, please.
And this is somewhat of a self-serving question. I'm going to move now to your last study. I thought that this was a really fascinating study, and so this is again somewhat selfish, but I was curious how you think about, what kind of recommendations would you make to people about the number of tokens that, like how they can decide on a number of tokens. I really loved that you varied the number in your design. I thought that was a really great aspect of your study. And so I was left thinking, okay, if I want to implement something like this, how do I practically go about thinking about the number of tokens?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Prof. With respect to that, the study on bag of lemon, again, we found out that bag of lemon, in terms of accuracy and speed, better than bag of star, as well as the Likert. So fairing the study, what we found out there is that of all the tokens, we found out that bag of lemon, I mean, when we gave, the participant 3 token of budget, so which is equivalent to 3 best ideas. I said before, prior to the experiment, we asked the experts to select 3 best ideas from there. So an explanation I can give and the suggestion we offer, those who are trying to engage in an open innovation engagement is, so if they are selecting 3 best idea, for example, then it might be great for them to select to use 3 tokens. So if they are selecting, if they have an idea and they want to select 5 good idea at the end of the day, then they should give 5 tokens. Yeah. So we notice that the number of tokens matches the winners. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Once again, I just want to reiterate that this is a really impressive body of work, and congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Rebecca, for your time and for coming. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Rebecca. Now it is Valerie Shalin's turn. You're going to get another 15 minutes as well.
Okay, I'm going to look at the clock, Rebecca. I've learned from you. And I'm going to moderate this set of questions that I have. I really have 3, Gafari. They sort of start with something very detailed, and then something a little more abstract, and then finally, sort of super abstract. I'm going to start in the middle because I'm really worried about our time here. Just like Rebecca said, I really want to compliment you on the scope of the work. Whenever my students complain to me about how much I'm asking them to do, I'm going to give them your dissertation.
Thanks, Prof. Yeah.
And that ought to shut things down considerably. So congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
But these pesky academics, we always want more. So looking sort of forward into the future, not just the experimental work that you have in mind, but sort of the theoretical work is kind of what I want to focus on. And so I want to ask you, what exactly is a belief, and what makes a good belief?
Okay. Yeah, should I answer that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think belief is a conviction or acceptance of something to be true, which is often not backed by scientific findings, and in some cases it's backed by scientific or experimental, empirical. So, but I believe will be great. So if it is backed by, empirical findings or scientific findings. For example, I can believe, maybe someone can just say, okay, I believe climate change is worse. So at the same time, climate change, is not. So it's actually caused by the behavior of people. So, for example, now that belief, it will now be considered accurate if it is backed up by scientific findings or empirical results.
Okay, so that's kind of a grounding kind of an argument, that there are data that support the belief. But are there other dimensions of belief quality that you would want to consider, especially for the forecasting situation that you've described, where we really don't know what's going to happen, but there still might be criteria for evaluating the legitimacy of a belief apart from the grounding in fact? What might those be?
Prof, may I kindly ask that you be more explicit with your question? Sorry.
Sure. So, we when we're forecasting, we actually don't know what is going to happen. Yeah. But there still is a basis for evaluating the quality of a belief. Yeah. What is that basis? And is it just restricted to grounding in fact? What else? What other criteria might we use to evaluate the legitimacy of someone's belief?
Yeah, thanks, Prof. Like I've said the other time, if a belief is backed by scientific findings, look at the study 2. We try to introduce the concept of prediction market. And one of prediction market, it has been scientifically proven that the result or outcome from there tends to have the high likelihood that is going to be correct. So, and that's why some company, we have a professor here at the School of Collective Intelligence, Professor Emil. So, and he has a platform, and in that platform, they make prediction, crowd-based collective intelligence prediction, which at the end of the day, most time come out to be true. So, and they've even published paper on that. So what I'm trying to say in essence is that, so for the belief that's going to be considered accurate, then probably, if such prediction comes from the prediction market and there's going to be a kind of gold standard, like so in the situation whereby one can compare the result of that group with the result that actually came from the prediction market. And for the stimulus check, you can see that when we ask which of the participants, which of the group member is likely going to be correct, so majority of them said John is going to be correct because his prediction is in line with what he obtained from the prediction market, which has been scientifically proven. I don't know if that answers your question, Prof.
It's still a kind of a grounding argument. And I think there might be other issues at stake. For example, what about the logical qualities of the belief and the way in which you combine the factual content? What about the scope of the argument for the belief? I think a lot of misinformation is based on the idea that you just look at a narrow set of facts and you don't consider other dimensions of the context. And so it's not just a ground, at least in my opinion, it's not just a grounding argument that needs to be made, but a sort of broader consideration of argument quality. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, sorry, please, could you reply can you restate the last one?
In a different way. Suppose, and I think there's every reason to think about doing this.
Okay. Yeah.
Suppose you're writing an article for you're summarizing your dissertation for either Psych Bulletin or Psych Review, where the idea is to integrate the multiple dimensions that contribute to a quality belief. Using your dissertation and results as the basis for this, what are some of the constructs that you would suggest inform that sort of overall model of belief quality?
Yeah. In terms of the belief, let me think about it.
Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
That might help you. There is something that's circulating in the news these days about Joe Biden's presence. I think it was a G7 meeting where they were all assembled in front of a camera that had a fixed field of view. Okay. And at one point, Biden turned away from the camera and what was going on in that situation and glanced over to his, I guess it was his left. And because the field of view of the camera did not include what was going on in the left, the interpretation of that situation was that Biden was wandering or not paying attention. So the belief that Biden was not paying attention was really, in some viewpoints at least, misinformation, because in fact, there was a wider context, a set of issues. In fact, there was a parachutist off to the side or something like that, that undermined that assertion and really should inform the evaluation of a belief or an assertion like that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Prof. I think I understand the question a bit. I think in that situation, for example, the example of Joe Biden you use. So that's why at times we have like expert fact checkers. So, for example, we have experts who can fact check the accuracy, of a news, whether it is correct or not. I know probably they might have some other information, so which you actually mentioned that is not directly in the public. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in that particular case, the fact of whether or not he turned his attention away that's not inaccurate. That's not what the problem is. The problem is that the scope of the context was not considered in the explanation of what it was that was going on. There are a couple of other issues. How important is it that the belief aligns with knowledge and culture in evaluating the quality of a belief?
Yeah, thanks, Prof, for that question. For that, I will just say, for belief, probably it should be backed up by scientific findings or ground truth, because, there might be bias associated with cultural belief, or, there might be some superstition. So which, if it is considered, it might introduce some bias. So, but for the case of accuracy, so I think if it is accurate, backed up by scientific or empirical findings, then I think that should be fair. I would say it should be backed by scientific findings or by those who are experts in, they are not by one's belief or cultural background.
What about alignment with moral values?
Well,
Should that not be part of the evaluation of belief?
Yeah, thanks, Prof. I think there is one study that even suggests that when it comes to morality, so I think it's in one of the paper published by Professor Kusimano, that is, when it comes to morality, in that study, if I can still recall very well, they have a situation, so whereby to believe in whether one's friend is guilty of a corruption or guilty of robbery, and believing, it's what comes with back up with moral consideration. People tends to believe the latter, even if there is evidence supporting that. So that's why I will not encourage. I don't know if you get my point.
Yeah, no, I do. So I just think, moving forward, I think it would be helpful for you to consider a model of the multiple dimensions of belief quality. Something in the spirit of, I'm not saying you should do the math, but in the spirit of a structural equation model, where you can see all of these pieces fitting together. And in the interest of time, I can't really go into others, but you make a very good point about dynamism and changing environment in some of your work. I would add the problem of multi-objective decision making, because decisions are not isolated. And so I really think there's a role here for a bigger framework in which you can situate all of your really spectacular findings.
All right. Okay, thanks a lot, Prof, for your question and for your time. Yeah.
Thank you kindly, Valerie. We move on now to Siham Likshri, who has also 15 minutes. Do you want to use the same mic?
Yes, thank you. Congratulations on a really, really impressive body of research. In fact, I'm going to join Valerie in saying that I was absolutely impressed by the amount of work that you have put into your thesis, and saying that anybody who complains probably should see the work that you've done for real, because it's impressive. And, we don't see, I've looked at it and I've read it a few times, and I said, these are so many studies. I see so many publications in here just from this, from your thesis. That really impressive. Several studies that you have conducted, and really, really interesting topic. I feel like I'm kind of the outsider here, like the outlier, because I do work in HR, but I also do a lot of research on gender bias and, mostly the challenges that females face in male-dominated industries, cultures, and environments. And I've seen, and heard their fair share of preconceived, assumptions and the bias against women in several industries, mainly, firefighting, women in construction, women in aviation. That's just to count a few. And so I'm kind of, just really interested in reading more about what you're finding, because every single study that I have done has touched on bias against women. For instance, I'll just give you an example, and it was consistent across the board. Every single female that I have spoken with, that I have interviewed, that was in firefighting, has revealed that they were seen as incapable of doing some sort of, exercise, because they were considered as female. So for instance, if they were working on learning how to fold the fire hose and then put it back on the fire truck, one of the things is that they see another male rush in to help them do it. And that's one of those preconceived, assumptions. It's bias against women are not able to do this job, so let's go and help them. And they have, for several women, they were able to prove them wrong. So again, there's some preconceived, assumptions against certain groups. And again, in my context and what I have seen, that happens a lot, to women, especially in male-dominated cultures or environments or industries. So what do you think? What are some of the mitigating mechanisms you think can, women use in order to combat such bias?
Yeah, okay, thanks, Prof. First of all, I think I made mention in the last slide when I was talking about the mitigating. So since gender bias is, we can also link it to Myside bias in some sense. So giving preference, to particular gender, while you have prejudice for the, other. I think one of the ways to do that is probably having a kind of a blinded, I don't know, maybe for the case of the organization, so maybe if they want to recruit, so then there should be a kind of blinded approach. So whereby they blind probably the name as well as, some organization require that an applicant put the picture. So maybe that should be removed as well. So I think that's one of the way to mitigate that. And another way we can do that, so it's a typical example from École Normale Supérieure Doctoral School. I think I was telling you before the start of the defense that, so I was grateful when you accepted to be part of the committee, because one of the problems we had then was, from ED 540, that is the doctoral school, we were asked to, have equal proportion of male and female. So we have many males but in Africa and at all the females we got, they were not willing to travel down here. So, but at the end of the day, we later find you. So I think one of the thing we can do is to just implement such policy that can actually make them put. I don't know if I've answered the question in some way.
Thank you. So just to kind of put this into perspective, yes, when it comes to hiring, can happen. And that would be a great segue for my next comment. Okay. But for instance, in firefighting, they have to do some physical exercises before they're able to actually get the job. So there are certain things that can make it a little bit difficult to just go on, with the resume. And if you look at resumes here in Morocco as opposed to the ones in the US, you can't put a picture, right? And right now we're actually experimenting with kind of mitigating, the impact of bias by eliminating people's names as well. So a lot of time we have started that experiment in my current institution, and we're looking at the impact and if it's going to help, get a, eliminate the bias that comes with where people got their education from. Are they from, what is their background? What does their name look like? All of these things are, they really impact a person's ability, for instance, to get a job. So for instance, if you have a person whose name is Sergio and then without a picture, right? And then the same resume of a person named John, the chances are John would get the job, not Sergio. And there were a lot of experiments, and that's also based, that's because of bias. So kind of curious about what do you think your approach would be in that case? And do you think we're ever able to get over this sort of bias?
Yeah, well, for that, I need some time to think about that. For example,
it's a big question. You're not supposed to give me an answer right now, but just something to think about.
Example, from the perspective of the gender, the female herself. Yeah. So I'm going to think about this. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's it for me.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Siam. I misstated the order of business, so I think I should go before Dirk Bowe, just to have the external members of the committee first. So like my colleagues, I was super impressed. Sorry, we're all saying the same thing again and again, and none of us will put it as beautifully as Valerie did with the students. So, you know, it was a fantastic, very impressive work. I mean, I can't believe you did all of this in 3 years. I mean, that's just really, really spectacularly remarkable. I mean, you should be extremely proud of yourself. I mean, we don't see this every day. We see this very rarely, in fact. One thing I really enjoyed was seeing in your PhD a very cool list of the abandoned projects. I thought it was extremely useful. I mean, I've never seen this before. I think it's incredibly positive. It's very nice to see some, not just the abandoned projects, but also the negative results, the things that just didn't work, that you tried, you know, here's precisely what we did, and it just didn't work at all. I think it's super helpful. It's so hard to publish negative results. I mean, it just never happens, but it's incredibly helpful for the field. So kudos for the wonderful, wonderfully original, you know, thing to do. So I wanted to make a couple of suggestions on the loyalty study, because I had several thoughts, kind of very much along the lines that Rebecca Littman was also expressing, and then I want to push you on the theory considerations as well, in some perhaps different directions. One thing that I was wondering was, what is the baseline for loyalty? So from what I understood in your study in chapter 2, you didn't really sort of measure some kind of baseline consideration about loyalty. So is it that the optimistic speaker is perceived as more loyal than a basic baseline, and the pessimistic, or is the pessimistic person perceived as less loyal than baseline? Is there an inflation or a deflation on both cases, or only one of the cases? What's going on here? Do you have some notion of that? Did I miss this bit of information, or is this something that you measured in some other way?
Say that people considered pessimistic John as less loyal. So, you know, in some sense, because the scale, you know, for the loyalty measure, we have it on the scale of 1 to 7. And in most of the cases, I think for optimistic condition, we have it probably from average of 6 and above, and let me say from 5 and above. So, but for the case of pessimistic John, is somehow below the average. So, which is why I said, so they consider it as less loyal to the organization.
When you say the average, you mean the average of the optimistic and pessimistic?
Exactly.
Okay, yeah. So the thing is, we don't know where the baseline is. So it could be that the baseline is at the optimist, so that it's the pessimist that's pushing us down, or it could be, as you just said, that the baseline is in the middle. But we don't know unless we specifically get a baseline, meaning, you know, John makes a prediction, and the prediction is neither optimistic nor pessimistic. I'm just suggesting perhaps an addition to the design, which to my understanding was not part of the study, but that could help sort of clarify whether there is a positive benefit for being optimistic, or actually just mostly a negative. You know, yeah. Am I making sense?
Yeah. Prof, what about a situation whereby the majority is uncertain? Do you think that might actually work? Because in experiment 7, we consider additional manipulation where the majority is just uncertain. They said, they are not certain about what will be the outcome of the prediction. So, and in that case, we have prediction of John, against as well as support. Then we found actually the same thing. I understand what you say, but I'm just asking if, that might actually work in that situation.
You're right. Good. Thank you. Good point. I think that might offer something very close to the kind of baseline that I'm suggesting. Yeah. Thanks. One suggestion, because I was asking myself the same question as Rebecca Littman, which is, what can we do to mitigate this perception of disloyalty when we are saying something pessimistic? One thing I was wondering was, what if the pessimistic forecast is accompanied by a suggestion for fixing it, for mitigating it? So listen, I think we're going, in the wrong direction. Here's some facts that explain why we're going the wrong direction. And here is how I think we can turn this around. And and I think if we do this, we can really fix things. So, I wonder, I'm asking you to speculate now, but I'm inviting you to speculate. Do you think this is worth studying? Could this help a bit? Is this something you're interested in doing in the future?
Somehow related to the framing study I talk about. I think if I can quickly have access to it on experiment 5B, so we want to, finalize the study with that framing study. And what we actually did there was that we have additional condition. So in that case, before John give, his own prediction, he says, oh, look, it's not that I don't want good for the company, but, I saw what you guys are now saying, and this is the basis of my a prediction. And we found out there that although it's just a pilot, we've not pre-register it. So for the case of the new condition, it's somehow close. There was no significant difference between it and that of an optimistic condition. You see what I mean? So that is a situation whereby he says, okay, now he gives like a kind of explanation before making his prediction. So people, predicted him in the same way they predicted the optimistic John.
I understand, but the explanation is really just reinforcing the pessimism. It's giving reasons for the pessimistic view. What I'm suggesting is presenting something positive with the pessimistic thing that nevertheless is not about sort of de-emphasizing the pessimistic thing or saying, oh, but by the way, I think we're great, in other ways, it's not BS. It's really sort of a precisely a constructive constructive way of sort of fixing the negative facts as a way to try to find, some way of mitigating this that doesn't involve, some kind of, how should I put this, affirming loyalty, which I don't think we want to do either. I don't want to say I love this company, I love them so much, but here's an issue. I'd rather say here's an issue and here's how we fix it. That sounds nice. Yeah. Continuous improvement.
Thanks.
Something you consider if you decide to go on in these directions, which some of us have been recommending that you do, in terms of, actually all of us so far have been recommending that you do in terms of coming up with strategies for mitigating some of these things. Cool. Thank you. Do I have time? Yeah, I'm doing good. So I wanted to a couple of comments about the adversarial stuff. That's right, which I thought was very, very, very cool. One thought that popped to mind immediately is, why is there so little adversarial collaboration in psychological science? So there's a couple of historic examples. So I think maybe the first one, or the first sort of well-known one, was with definitely Danny Kahneman, and now I forget if it was Gigerenzer or Hofbrage or
Gary Klein. It's Gary Klein.
Cool, that's it. And Barbara Mellers. Barbara Mellers was the arbiter, basically. So adversarial collaboration in science. This has happened very seldom. I think I can think of like 2 or 3 examples. Do you have any thoughts on that? Sort of why do we not do more of this? Do you know what I'm talking about, right? With adversarial collaboration in science. What this means is, so there's 2 individuals or more, but 2 camps that have 2 very different hypotheses, and that are really not, they just really disagree with each other. And there's somebody who they both trust, and who sort of, serves as an arbiter, as a referee, to make sure that everybody states their hypotheses very clearly. Everybody agrees on an experiment such that, and you put this in paper. If it goes this way, then X is right. If it goes that way, then Y is right. It's a very interesting model. It's been tried a couple of times. Nothing, it's not caught on. Do you have any thoughts on why it's so difficult? If we all agree, as your experiments have shown, if we all agree when asked that heterogeneous groups are awesome, right? Why do we not do it?
Well, I think in science, the reason why I think it's different from the one we are trying to consider, irrespective of the hypothesis being, made in science. What I'm trying to say is that there used to be like a common goal, probably in science. For example, now, if I have an hypothesis and you have another, The collaboration is to ensure that something good or better comes from the way. What I'm trying to see there is that the adversarial collaboration there might be somehow different from the one we are considering, because for the case of the fact checking and the citizen fact checker we considered, they have different ideology entirely. So, for example, some in one case they are left leaning, in another case they are right leaning. So probably I might be wrong, but it seems not to be closer to that of science, because for example, adversarial collaboration in science, although they have different hypotheses, but they are trying to get something out of it. Yeah.
Sorry, you are in for a rude awakening when you start your academic job. People can be very aggressive and very unreasonable. I promise you, there's some really, really intense disagreements. So I hear you, but I think the two may be more similar. But you're right. Of course, I'm pushing a connection that I'm stretching it. You're right. You're right about that. Let me move on to my theoretical considerations. So I agree. I very much agree with Valerie that was the thing that was missing from this wonderful dissertation. It's really impressive stuff, but I was missing a consideration of some of the most relevant, most central theoretical questions. You sort of you touch this every now and again, but then you don't give us enough. For example, in the dissertation, you write several times, and in fact, you mentioned it today in the response you gave a little bit earlier, that perhaps all or most or very, very many biases can be reduced to Myside bias. You mentioned this several times. This does not see, and you gave an example, by the way, just now, the idea of gender bias. However, this is blatantly false for the well-known reason that many women can be biased against women. I mean, it's extremely well described that, a community X can very well be indoctrinated without too much work, in the sense that it's happened so many times in the history of humanity, can be very much indoctrinated into having, pretty ingrained bias against our own community. So I'm not asking you to expand on this particular case. I'm just giving you an example of how there's a theoretical claim you've made, a strong, bold claim, but you haven't given us your reasons. Can you now take the opportunity to expand a little bit, not necessarily touching on the example I just gave? This was just to point out. Can you expand now on what you mean when you say that maybe much of this bias stuff can be reduced to just the one thing?
Thank you so much, Prof. Or maybe I can just say that instead of using most, maybe I can use many. So for example, now for let's say heading, for example, or like groupthink as a typical example, for groupthink, the tendency for, group to, converge on a certain belief without necessarily considering the other. So, in that particular case, I think it's like a kind of Myside bias, because they are trying to favoring a decision from one part of the group while discrediting in some sense the other. So that's why. But like you said, I think one of the reviewer also made suggestion about that. So he said, instead of using most, then probably I can use many. Like many cognitive biases can boil down to Myside bias. And Prof, the reason why we even made claim, and I think what the author said in the article is that I think I gave distinct difference between confirmation bias and Myside bias. For confirmation bias, while it is a tendency to favor, interpret, or seek out information that confirms, one's prior belief, then Myside bias, in addition, discredits, the opponent view. So, thanks for your suggestion. And for the gender bias, I understand that we might not say it is gender bias, because some female are also biased against, their female counterparts. Yeah.
What you say is that what we found is that a lot of females say, I did the hard work. They need to learn the same way. They're not supporting each other. That's what usually happens.
Okay.
One of the manifestations of this guy. Yeah, thank you, Gafari. That was a fantastic answer. Thank you so much. I'll conclude just by making the following remark. I would love to see more of that. So the direction would be, one important direction will be, try and look at these biases one at a time. Define Myside bias precisely, and now look at the overlap by defining each of these. I think there's some really interesting theory work to be done there. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Prof, for your helpful feedback.
All right, we continue on. We are totally on time. This is going great. We continue on to remarks by Dirk Poe. See if your mic works, Dirk.
Right. Okay, I can only follow what all others of the examination panel already said. So completely, very much impressed by your work. I think this is a fantastic example for the PhD students that we have here still at ABS at the Business Pole. So thank you so much for your work. Let me start perhaps with a few more specific questions, specifically regarding the first bunch of 7 studies, right, which look at the organizational environment. And hopefully there's also something to take away for our audience out of this. So first of all, the over-optimism bias, right, that you described. When can this be a really good thing, and when can this be a bad thing in organizations, looking at the practical side, and what can be done to distinguish when it's a good thing or a bad thing?
Okay, Prof, I will say thanks for your question and for your feedback. So I will say that, or let me distinguish between optimism and optimism.
Mm-hmm.
You know, optimism, have a kind of a positive nature compared to optimism. So by optimism bias is having like overconfidence that negative thing and will not happen to someone. But you know, optimism at some point might be, for example, might be good in principle in some situation, because it can, how will I call it? So, for example, if we tell the student, or a student, for example, let me use my case as an example. If I'm optimistic, probably that at the end of the day, I'm going to pass my thesis, but I'm not over-optimistic. Mm-hmm. Because over-optimism might lead me not to read my presentation or not to prepare well. Mm-hmm. But optimistic in some sense, I will be, between two ways, to have some fears and also, a small confidence that if I prepare very well, I'm going to. So I don't know if that clarifies the distinction. So what overconfidence is, over-optimism is like having overconfidence, the bias that, or overconfidence that something negative will never happen to someone. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And is there a way for an organization to distinguish between these two extremes?
Well, thanks, Prof. One thing is what I think we can do to distinguish both of them is that taking, diverse view from others. Mm-hmm. So, for example, we are going to make a lot of profits, and it's good. It's an optimistic statement. And if someone, give a diverse or a response that is different from what the person give, then one should take that into account. So not taking that into account, meaning one is having confidence that the negative thing is not going to happen. I don't know if, so maybe if diversity of opinion is taken into account. Yeah.
Okay, let's move to the next one then. I noticed that when you ran the experiments using different types of organization, right? There was sports, there was politics, and there were business organizations, right? The effects seem to be different, don't they? How you interpret this?
Well, I think, thanks, Prof. One thing I notice is, maybe let me just go to experiment 1 for sports. You know, if you check the composite, okay, sorry, let me just go there. Okay, great. This is a great example of what so Professor Deck was asking why across the organization context, so the effects were different. An explanation I can give to this is, if you check the lead diffy for the sports categories, and what we are trying to ask there is whether John will be considered as someone who is an ardent supporter or a fair weather supporters who can leave an organization when things becomes difficult. So the explanation I can give to that, which I also mentioned on the thesis, is that, football or sport, for example, it's either win or loss. And even, if players are going for the match, or their fans are going there, they have the impression that, yeah, I can either win or I can either lose. So which is why I think we did not obtain the leave effect there, because it might be rare for maybe a football club, probably at the end of the day, just to, leave a particular football club for just one loss. So, and this is just in reference with Manchester United and Liverpool. So, so which I think is the difference from there from others. So aside that, so for the lawyer, the effect seems, we obtain the effect for them.
And comparing parties and organizations.
Yeah, for party and organization, yeah, in party, there are, when it comes to politics or political affiliation, in fact, in the literature, bias are more recorded. And that's why our colleagues in the literature study these bias, and even in our lab. So when we want to measure bias and many other things, we used to consider, political party context in United States. So between, Democrat and Republican, because it used to be tense. So compared to other situations, which is why I think, for example, if you check the party, so you will see that the difference is very larger. So because a party, a diehard fan of a particular party, I think it happens even in Nigeria. So when they know that this candidate is very bad, then people might still be supporting them blindly. So which I think, is the reason for the larger difference compared with the organization context. Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you also a methodological question. Sometimes when it comes to how we ask the questions, right, on the questionnaire, sometimes the way how we ask the question and present them, etc., can also induce some biases, can't it, right? What have you done about potential biases?
Yeah, well, in most cases, we try to counterbalance the order of the dependent variable. So, for example, for this particular study, we have two dependent variables, the loyalty as well as the leave. So we try to counterbalance them such a way that in one, for one participant, the leave question is going to come first. So for the other participants, the loyalty question is going to come first. And, we try to, and that's the reason why we had a subsequent experiment, was we are trying to check the confounds. So take, for example, for the experiment 3, we don't know whether the loyalty is the one causing the effect or the, a disagreement with the group. So then we try to, and probably, in fact, in some cases, we also include manipulation check. It was because of the time, that's why I did not show it. In experiment 7, we gave a question of manipulation check, whereby we ask whether they think John is either optimistic and pessimistic. Let me try and show that. Yeah. Okay. I don't know if you can see this very well. Okay, the first question here. Yeah. So, we asked how optimistic versus pessimistic are John's colleagues about the launch of the phone, and how optimistic is John about the launch of the phone. This is just to, check whether they actually understand our question so as to remove the bias. And if you see the result, Prof, you will see that for the organization context, so for the optimistic condition, we find out that many people, say that the majority is optimistic. So look at the case of the comment. Now I want to check that for the John. So this is for the John. So for optimistic, you can see the box for optimistic is higher. So for pessimistic, so it is somehow lower. Yeah. So in essence, to answer your question, we can use manipulation check. Yeah, to check whether the question is rightly, asked.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Finally, when I look at all your studies, right, and different axes of your work and the studies within these different axes and the different contexts here, this looks extremely interesting and fascinating, and it looks also at the same time quite broad, right? So my question is, how do these different axes and the studies within them, how do they all integrate and fit together? And this perhaps links a little bit or connects a little bit with his question about the theoretical, overarching theoretical framework, right? So if you think of all that into an overarching theoretical framework, how would you make sense of this? I don't know. The question is clear to you what I mean?
Yeah, I understand what you said. In fact, I think for the last study, which is somehow not that in line with the rest, but for study 1, 2, 3, I can say that it's more of Myside bias, the influence of Myside bias and the spread of information within group. And, I said in the start of in the introduction that, taking the perspective that the dynamics determining the spread of information within social group, so emerges from aggregation of many individuals. So the intervention to also improve the quality and quantity can also occur at both organization as well as the individual level. So holistically, what I'm trying to check is how individual actions and decisions affect the overall spread of information. So, and that's why probably we consider the Myside bias. And for the first study, optimism is somewhat close for what Professor Safano said the other time, that we agree in some sense that most of these cognitive biases we said, or don't let me use most, many of them can also boil down to Myside bias. So in essence, for the chapter axis 3, which is about Myside bias and impact on scientific community, that's Myside bias. So likewise, for the optimism bias, if we check it very well, we can see that it can also lead to Myside bias. So as well as the second one as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that they're all related to Myside bias, right? That's clear. However, when we are talking about Myside bias, there are probably different or possibly different concepts and dimensions that have to do with that, right? And this is what I mean when I'm asking about how all these things, elements, components integrate to an overarching picture, right? When you look at, say, a storyline from the first bunch of elements or dimensions, the journey to the last one in the last study. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. It's okay. Maybe, Prof, if I understand, maybe it's just about the spread of information in the group. Yeah, the influence of biases on the spread of information within groups.
Within groups, that's the first one, right?
Yeah, no, overall.
Overall, okay.
Yeah, within group, because the main objective of the thesis is, finding where we can improve the quality of good information, accurate information, while on the other hand, reducing bad information or misinformation. That's the core objective. And that's why, in the third study, third axis, for example, we are trying to reduce misinformation. And the first, then we are trying to see where we can improve accuracy of information within group. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dirk. We are now going to conclude with brief remarks, traditionally brief remarks by the advisors. We'll start with Mark Klein, if you're there, still there with us. Mark, traditionally, these are relatively brief remarks. I would say to definitely keep it under 10 minutes, if you can. Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah, no, I do plan to keep them quite brief. So in addition to the comments that the other committee members made about if among other things, just the sheer amount of work that Gafari did. There were a couple of things that I noticed too. One is that Gafari has made a pretty remarkable personal journey, starting in sub-Saharan Africa in a different culture, and then, coming to Morocco, and then, spending a lot of time in France and developing a lot of connections with professors, certainly throughout Europe. And so that I just kind of think that's a very cool, impressive personal journey. And the other thing that struck me is that the people commenting on his thesis, they seemed like really into it. A lot of questions, a lot of interest, and well, that was neat too. So aside from that, the comment or question I had is, it's not super technical, but I was thinking that given Gafari's cross-cultural journey, I wondered, Gafari, if you could speculate a little bit on to what, and maybe you did, and I missed, and I apologize, but anyhow, speculate on to what extent the results you've been finding are culturally specific. Are they more appropriate, for the so-called weird group? Do you think they would be equally applicable in the cultural setting, for example, that you come from? So that was my question.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Professor Klein, and thanks for all your support and assistance. I must say that my first article, which is part of this dissertation, actually came from collaboration with Professor McLean. Thank you very much. So with respect to your question, it was because I was rushing for the fact-checking study. We actually tried to replicate it with a Nigeria context, with Nigerian participants. But, one of the challenges we have is that in Africa, thanks to Professor Strickland and they are trying to build something that is related to prolific now. So in Nigeria and some of the African countries, we have problem of getting data. And, during my limited holiday in Nigeria, I tried to, I told Professor Strickland that, I just posted these online since we couldn't find a crowdsourcing website. Then he asked me, you have to go to them one by one or go to some university. So, and you know what we did in this case for the pilot study, we got data from that. And, using different political atmosphere in Nigeria, because we might not have the same political atmosphere like that of United States, because in Nigeria, instead of having, liberal or conservative, what we have is, a party in opposition and the ruling party. So what is interesting, which we got for the pilot, which I want to improve on, is that we found the same effect. People prefer, a heterogeneous group of fact checkers, so than the individual group of fact checkers. So which possibly answered your question that I'm considering this with respect to our cultural. And another thing that is worth stating is that I have like a session which I used to do online, and it's about whenever I give a talk in the school, or I have a presentation in English, I used to translate it into my language in Yoruba. So, and I explain the concept in our language as well, so that, people see the beauty, as well as the ecological validity of that study. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Mark. Brent, do you want to give us your concluding remarks, please?
Yeah, so I just want to say first to Gafari that it's been an incredible journey to work with Gafari for the last 4 years, 5 years. I've lost track of the exact number of years, but Gafari has really been an incredible student and just a machine in terms of data collection, data interpretation, running experiments. writing manuscripts, coming up with ideas. It's been wonderful. It's far exceeded my highest expectations. So congratulations to you, Gafari, on a wonderful PhD, and I wish you well in the future. I also want to say it's just like a very special occasion, as Gafari is the first PhD student to graduate from the School of Collective Intelligence. We have the scientific director here with us, Cathal Madigan, and it's mainly the students from the School of Collective Intelligence, and it's wonderful to see that this whole thing kind of coming to life. Part thanks to Gafari. It's also the first co-tutored thèse, like a co-directed PhD between the Paris, France, and 6P. So that's also another kind of achievement. So it's kind of a historic PhD defense, and so also bravo for carrying the flag on that, Gafari. I had just a couple of remarks about the scientific content. So the first one is about Mark's point, question asking to what extent this some of these findings would be cross-culturally replicable. Just as an observation is that when we do a lot of executive education and interacting with people from industry in Morocco. And when and I actually present a lot of Gafari's work in those contexts, and particularly the work about loyalty. And I've actually just quizzed people. It's like, has anyone ever experienced this in actual business, or in their kind of daily affairs? And I get so many responses. People are enthusiastically like, yes, this is the problem. You put your hand, like you've kind of hit the nail on the head with this. So that's, that kind of speaks both to the ecological validity as well as the cross, sort of the cross-cultural replicability, or likely replicability of that finding. The second, that's just more of a remark than a question, and then I want to finish with a question for Gafari. So in France right now, I don't know if you've been following the news, but they've just dissolved the Assemblée Nationale, and they're about to have these snap elections for a new Assemblée. And what's looking like the most likely scenario is that the parliament will be divided into three, with no clear majority. So you'll have the far left, the far right, and the center, and there will be no majority. So they're going to have trouble putting into place a prime minister. And I wonder, in thinking about a context like that, in a very polarized society similar to America, but with different parliamentary elections as opposed to the American system, could something like this be introduced in France? And do you think it could work? Could we get people from the far left, far right, and the center to fact check? That work?
Yeah, in principle, I think it should be able to work. So because take for example the typical case of Nigeria I used. We also have, another political atmosphere different from United States. In fact, there is no liberal or conservative party. So what we have is that a party in power as well as the opposition. And for close to 20 years since, the start of democracy, it has been the case. So if we are able to, obtain, the same with Nigeria participants, I don't see reason why we should not replicate that with France. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think there'd be like any sort of secret ingredient to getting it to go? Like, do you think that people would initially be reticent to want to participate in an effect? Like, if like, say, somebody from the center is like, hey, do you want to fact check with Marine Le Pen voters or Bardella voters? Maybe people would be reluctant to do that. Do you think there would be, or do you think people would just be, yeah, let's do it, let's see what happens? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it might be worth checking.
I don't know.
But if people see the relevance behind it. And, from the study of Pennycook, I cited that people tend to believe in the result of fact-checking when they know in principle that, the outcome is true. So if we explain the possible positive consequences, so they are going to, like for example, even when we look further behind political, even in religion, in South Africa, there used to be an association, of many religions coming together. And this, to some extent, has solved a lot of problem. When people have different beliefs and different things they believe in. So if they know, probably they are going to have some positive, like an advantage, which is going to come from there. I don't think they will have objection doing that, but it will be worth checking. Yeah.
Well, I'd love to see that study done.
Yeah. Okay. And Prof, I would like to, I appreciate you as well for believing in me and for all your support. Thank you very much. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Gafari. Thanks, Brent. Do not spend all of your emotional charge right now, because in a little bit. So we're now going to adjourn so that the committee, so Dirk and myself are going to go into a room over there, and I invite Valerie and Rebecca to please join us in a Zoom link that I just emailed to you guys. Awesome. So I'll open it up in 30 seconds. We're going to deliberate, and I think you are welcome to have some coffee at this point, or no, not yet.
Yeah, I think there's coffee and tea over in
All right. We won't be long.
The audience.
We won't be long. We'll be, I don't know, 10 minutes tops. And then we'll come back and pronounce the results of this defense.
So you
Sit tight.
emailed me the link. I'm not seeing it. Let me try something. Let me see again. No, I don't have a link yet. Who did you email it to? What address? Hey, Nick, can you hear me? Did you get an address? Oh, I can't hear. You're muted.
I'm not expecting a link
okay.
because I'm not on the committee.
Okay. So they'll figure out that I'm missing. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry.
Bye.
Hello, hello, hello. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1.
All right, is this working? Awesome. All right, welcome back. So the committee has met, and we have decided with great joy to attribute the degree of doctor to Gafari Lukumon, approved his thesis with honors. Let's please congratulate the new doctor. There's one more thing that must take place before this is fully and completely officialized, which is the new doctor, Dr. Lukumon, must now read the oath of the doctor's oath.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Mascarians and all the members of the committee. Once again, I thank you for coming. I mean, we've been here on this for the past 3 months. I appreciate your time. So for reading my thesis and for reviewing it, thank you very much. Also, I appreciate my supervisors for believing in me and our scientific directors, our collaborators. So my family, my friends, so my wife and my kids, as well as my siblings. So in the presence of my peers, you today's with the completion of my doctorate and in my quest for knowledge, I've carried out demanding research, demonstrated intellectual rigor, ethical reflection, and respect for the principle of research integrity. As I pursue my professional career, whatever my choosing field, I pledge to the greatest of my ability to continue to maintain integrity in my relationship to knowledge, to my methods, and to my results. So help me God. Yeah.
All right, thank you, everybody. Please join us for refreshments again if you hadn't had too much tea already. Thank you, Valerie, and thank you, Rebecca. And we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Congratulations, doctor.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Hafsa Abdullah. A kú oríire náà o.
Oríire ni sà.
Ọlọ́run fàlùbáríkà sí o.
Jazakumullahu khairan.
Abdullahi bá mi ya
Yóò
fọ́tò
kárí o.
tèmi kún o. Àfa Abdullahi bá mi ya fọ́tò tèmi kún o.
Oríire
Duplicate
ńlá
ara
ni
rẹ
o.
o. Bàbá Muisa ò gbọ́. Ó máa sọ. Àwọn àlékún a kú
Now,
oríire o.
yes sir, oríire ni sà.
Ọlọ́run
Ṣẹ́gbúrò
bá
àwọn ohun
fàlùbáríkà sí o. Dáadáa ni wọ́n wà.
Yeah,
Àwọ̀ láǹfààní ibi iṣẹ́ ọ̀já wọ̀ láǹfààní àti lọ. In fact,
àwa náà
àdúpẹ́ fọlọ́run o.
alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Àdúpẹ́ fọlọ́run.
Ìsàyẹ̀kú
Ọlọ́run túbọ̀
àdúgbò.
máa ṣe é kún rọrùn.
Alauma, Anissa.
Kódà. Ó yẹ kẹ́ ẹ wọ pléènì wá Morocco ni.
Àwọn náà wọ́n ní a máa dúró wa àbú.
Mo ń ṣàwàdà ni. Ọlọ́run fàlùbáríkà sí. Ọ̀rẹ́ tún pàtó àtúnṣe pẹ̀lú gọ́lọ́n.
Alauma.
Anybody lè fún mi signal bẹ́ẹ̀ ṣé sóhun wá ń jáde síta.
Ó ń jáde o, à ń gbọ́ yín gerege. Ọlọ́ tún kàn báyìí. Ọlọ́ kàn báyìí.
Kí lẹ wí?
Ọlọ́ tún kàn báyìí o.
Èmi àti yín náà ló kàn, èmi àti yín ló kàn o. Adésínà làbú, Adésínà ni wọ́n so pẹ̀lú ògo Ọlọ́run. Àwa àyókù náà á máa tẹ̀lé wọn lẹ́yọ kọ̀ọ̀kan náà ni. Ọlọ́run ṣètò wa náà rọrùn. Ọlọ́run ò dẹ̀ ní jí ó débẹ̀ dúró fáwọn náà.
Alauma.
A kú oríire náà. Mufti ẹ juwọ́ sí wa lókèrè tẹ́ bá ń rí wa, tẹ́ bá ń gbọ́ wa. Ẹ juwọ́ sí screen tẹ́ bá ń gbọ́ wa. Okay.
Madam Mushi.
So ohun wá tẹ̀ ń jáde, ó ń jáde gerege báyìí. Wàhálà ti wà.
Thank you, professors. Thank you. God bless you.
Congratulations o.
Ẹ kú oríire o bàbá. Ọlọ́run fàlùbáríkà sí o, kò ní débẹ̀ dúró. Ẹ wo, gbogbo ara ni mo fi kí yín.
Ẹ ṣeun, thank you very much.
Gbogbo ara mo fi kí yín.
Dr. Bayas.
A kú oríire náà.
Congratulations, Dr. Gafari.
Àfìgbà tẹ gbé story Imlili débí.
Dr. Lugabai.
Congratulations, sir. This is
Alhamdulillah.
Is very encouraging, very inspiring, actually.
Indeed.
Actually.
And everyone commented that it was very good work. Everyone said that it was like it's something to look up to, and I mean it just feels very good to know that.
It felt as if we did not have the discussion about his project before, even though we did. During the presentation, we were just like, I just felt wow, like even though that was not the first time I was hearing about it. It's amazing.
Wow.
Èmi náà ń close mo ń lọlé adúpẹ́.
A kú oríire orí akárí o. Arinze. Ezirim. Fidelis.
Okay, good evening,
Baba
sir.
Tunde.
You people are the next, though. You people are the next. Do quick, fast. Do quick.
You don't make error. They say.
Don't make error. I don't understand.
You have Yahaya, you have Kavina, you have there are plenty now.
Okay, make a no rush, Abby. Make a the calm down. Make a the calm down. Okay, no while we go wait for them. People ahead of us to go and get their own first.
Yeah.
It
was nice actually. It was nice today. Look at experiment everywhere.
Fine. How are you?
Serious.
Not bad. My life is good.
Yeah, a happy child.
Happy now. What will I do? My life is good. I'm living. I'm surviving Morocco.
I'm coming. Just give me some few days.
We can't wait to have you back.
Energy love.
What do you want to do for this place? Baba, better sit down for where you did.
Abi, now.
Okay, guys, me and they go. I won't come out.
Share. Oh, that ball.
Halo sobat. Oh, double. Who said that? I don't know. Yeah, yeah, me. Who said that? الحمد لله رب العالمين.
After this